is a review from the International Association of Colon Hydrotherapy's manual to prepare for the National Board of Colon Hydrotherapy exam. Many of the concepts might seem arbitrary, but these are the particular rules and standards that govern colon hydrotherapy from their perspective. So in the practice of colon hydrotherapy, adherence to guidelines of practice is important. That deals with receiving a formal program of education and training, and to be able to show competency to carry out a colon hydrotherapy treatment in a sanitary and safe way, and adhere to the regulatory guidelines and remain updated on the requirements, and also to obtain insurance for the practice. These are considered adherence to guidelines of practice. There are areas for a colon hydrotherapist to pay attention to in the adherence to guidelines of practice. What has to be paid attention to is whether or not there's a prescription requirement. IACT recommends that every procedure be authorized by a prescription signed by a licensed healthcare practitioner. This is only recommended, it's not required. But it is required for the purchase of the instrument for colon hydrotherapy is a prescription requirement. IACT recommends every procedure be done with authorized by a prescription signed by a licensed healthcare practitioner, because colon hydrotherapists are not licensed in most states except for Florida. But like I said, it's not required. But it is required, the prescription for the purchase of the colon hydrotherapy device. All purchases of equipment and its accessories must be obtained through a prescription. Other areas for a colon hydrotherapist to pay attention to under adherence to guidelines in practice is insertion of the speculum. Only healthcare practitioners with qualifications that allow them to carry out the insertion can perform the insertion on clients. All other therapists without such pre-qualifications must follow the directions of the referring physician, the guidelines of the manufacturer as registered by the FDA, or follow the guidelines of the state, municipality, etc. Where no guidelines exist, the client must insert the speculum and rectal tube. So there are guidelines that exist from the manufacturer as registered for the FDA. And so there's that. IACT recommends in their manual that trained therapists follow FDA guidelines. Therapists must be aware of the guidelines laid down by the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, the FDA. The U.S. FDA regulates the production of equipment used as health devices in the USA. All manufacturers of instruments of colon hydrotherapy in the USA must register their equipment with the FDA. The instruments must meet guidelines of safety standards and quality control. The FDA does not regulate the use of the instruments, however. Their function is to register the devices and provide the approval to market the same. It is thus important for all therapists to be aware of regulatory guidelines, especially in their country of practice, in order to avoid the consequence of undesirable legal actions. Colonic instruments operated by colon hydrotherapists are considered to be a Class II medical device under FDA regulation. This requires all purchase of equipment and its accessories must be obtained with a prescription. In the IACT manual, it is also mentioned under the adherence to guidelines of practice, safety concerns for colon hydrotherapists to be aware of. In spite of the fact that the procedure is minimally invasive, there remains a risk of infection and injury. Such incidences are isolated and rare. However, when it occurs, it is highlighted in the medical literature and in the press. Every procedure carries with it the following risks: injury, infection, dependence, imbalance, interaction, and abuse. It is therefore important for therapists in practice to always be alert to the possibility of these risks to avoid their occurrence. The theory and general principles for colon hydrotherapy is that the practice of colon hydrotherapy stems from the principle that regular evacuation of the bowel is necessary to avoid ill health. Modern day living creates circumstances such as poor diet, stressful lifestyle, and unhealthy personal habits, resulting in irregular or inefficient bowel movement. Poor elimination will lead to the accumulation of waste matter within the bowel with subsequent health problems. This can affect digestion, absorption, intestinal flora, and intestinal mucosa integrity, etc., and compromise intestinal function. It is common to read about functional disturbances of the bowels resulting in different symptoms and health problems. This is an actual diagnosis from gastroenterologists, as they will say, that you have a functional issue. These include indigestion, constipation, irritable bowel syndrome, and a host of functional bowel disorders. The purpose of colon hydrotherapy is to assist with the smooth evacuation of bowel contents. Water infused into the colon hydrates the bowel, softens and loosens waste, and stimulates peristaltic contractions. There remains a lot of misconception about the procedure, which we will talk about on the next slides. Okay, so the facts mentioned in IACT's manual about colon hydrotherapy are that the procedure introduces water gently into the colon to support the evacuation of waste from the bowel. Well, that's obviously a fact. The procedure is considered invasive with low risk, and it's been shown to help with constipation. There are also mentioned some myths about colon hydrotherapy. And since most people don't know about it that are trying it for the first time, this is good for them to know that this is not accurate information. So the myth is that the procedure is high risk. It is not. The procedure is dangerous and may cause serious injury. That is not the case. Water is infused at high pressure and is sucked out afterwards. That is definitely not the case. There's no sucking out of anything, and the pressure is very low during the treatment. Insertion of a speculum rectal tube goes far into the colon. No, it does not. It goes where it's safely able to go, which is not very far into the colon. And that there is a danger for introducing infection. No, this is basically almost impossible with using the device correctly. The health benefits of colon hydrotherapy mentioned are that it's useful in the maintenance of bowel function. Poor elimination results in stagnation of physical waste, which can lead to fecal impaction, especially in the old, weak, and immobile and frail. Colon function is adversely affected. Colon hydrotherapy can stimulate muscular contraction and improve bowel function and elimination. Also, it stimulates the reflex points. It aims to help prepare the bowel for diagnostic prep, such as colonoscopy, and to remove radioactive material after barium enemas, and for use when medically indicated. So it is the case that sometimes doctors will give a prescription to someone for colon hydrotherapy. The rationale for the practice of colon hydrotherapy starts with the concept of auto-intoxication. So it's considered totally unfounded and unscientific by the conventional medical community. But current medical teaching is that the bowel functions normally and naturally and does not require any form of cleansing. Colon hydrotherapists beg to differ based on the results observed during the procedure. The procedure provides the opportunity for the therapist to observe the quality and quantity of the fecal matter that's being discharged during the treatment. It provides an opportunity to assess that discharge, so it's diagnostic, in the form of solid and gaseous states of hydration, states of digestion, food particles, etc. So in Chinese medicine, this would be like an extended aspect of observation. So also, it stimulates reflex points. The theory proposes that reflex points are scattered along the length of the colon internally. The reflex points represent different parts and functions of the body. Waste and mucus can impinge on these reflex points and produce symptoms and health problems. Colon hydrotherapy hydrates the body. The colon functions to absorb water normally. Almost 2 liters of chyme digested food arrives at the cecum. This volume is reduced to approximately 100 to 150 milliliters of stool before it's eliminated. So the body, from the stomach of 2 liters of something, turns it into 100 to 150 milliliters. So the body has now sucked the water out of that feces. So the colon hydrotherapy introduces pure filtered water into the colon, and a dehydrated person will actively absorb the water from the colon. IACT recommends in their manual that trained therapists follow FDA guidelines. Therapists must be aware of the guidelines laid down by the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, the FDA. The U.S. FDA regulates the production of equipment used as health devices in the USA. All manufacturers of instruments of colon hydrotherapy in the USA must register their equipment with the FDA. The instruments must meet guidelines of safety standards and quality control. The FDA does not regulate the use of the instruments, however. Their function is to register the devices and provide the approval to market the same. It is thus important for all therapists to be aware of regulatory guidelines, especially in their country of practice, in order to avoid the consequence of undesirable legal actions. Colonic instruments operated by colon hydrotherapists are considered to be a Class II medical device under FDA regulation. This requires all purchase of equipment and its accessories must be obtained with a prescription.